In this episode of Biblical Unlocks, we will go through a chapter of the Bible and make it make sense in your life today. Studies routinely show that reading your Bible regularly significantly lowers symptoms of depression, anxiety, and anger, whilst also increasing forgiveness, compassion, and a sense of purpose. So if you enjoy episodes like this, please consider following and rating the show. It's free, helps me out a lot, and you can always change your mind later. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Biblical Unlocks. Today we're going to go through Exodus chapter 4, and I've been really enjoying the beginning of Exodus just because of the deep insights we can get into the biblical narrative, obviously. But more than that, we're learning about Moses, and Moses is talked about significantly by none other than Jesus Christ himself. So it's a good story, and I really want to do it justice. Here we have Exodus chapter 4. We read in Exodus chapter 3 about the divine name of God and how Jesus invokes this divine name in John chapter 8 verse 58, and how this is the name of God. And the name of God is I am. You should call I am, and I am who I am, and whatnot. Okay, so this is a really important sort of motif to wrap our heads around. Something I also wanted to point out was that here we see that, in Exodus chapter 4, we're going to see Moses actually objecting to God's call, right? And Moses is going to make a lot of excuses, and I hope we can see ourselves in these excuses. That is to say, we can sort of put off God's call, but God will always stay patient with us. But God gives us signs, miraculous signs, in fact, that we often forget and we put aside. So hopefully we'll be able to understand all of this. So this is immediately after the burning bush that we saw in Exodus chapter 3. And now Moses is going to face his fear, his insecurity, his family complications, all of these things. And Exodus 4 is going to teach us that God equips weak vessels, that is to say, people who are weak, who are unqualified, who they aren't those you would immediately think of to lead in God's divine plan. But the other side of the coin here is that when you are supposedly weak, when you feel as though you do not feel qualified, that's exactly when God can use you, because when you are unqualified, that's when you are truly humble. And we're going to see that as well. Okay, enough prelude, let's read. Exodus chapter 4 verse 1. Then Moses answered, "But look, they may not believe me or listen to me, but say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.' The Lord said to him, 'What is that in your hand?' He said, 'A staff.' And he said, 'Throw it on the ground.' So he threw the staff on the ground, and it became a snake. And Moses drew back from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Reach out your hand and seize it by the tail.' So he reached out his hand and grasped it, and it became a staff in his hand, so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you." Verse 6. Again, the Lord said to him, "Put your hand inside your cloak." He put his hand into his cloak, and when he took it out, his hand was diseased, as white as snow. Then God said, "Put your hand back into your cloak." So he put his hand back into his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored like the rest of his body. If they will not believe you, or heed the first sign, they may believe the second sign. If they do not believe even these two signs, or listen to you, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. Verse 10. But Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past, nor even now that you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue." Then the Lord said to him, "Who gives speech to mortals? Who makes them mute or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to speak." But he said, "O my Lord, please send someone else." Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "What of your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Even now he is coming to meet you. And when he sees you, his heart will be glad. You shall speak to him, and the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you what you shall do. He indeed shall speak for you to the people. He shall serve as a mouth for you, and you shall serve as God for him. Take in your hand this staff, with which you shall perform the signs." Verse 18. Moses went back to his father-in-law Jethro and said to him, "Please let me go back to my own people in Egypt and see whether they are still living." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." The Lord said to Moses in Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all those who were seeking your life are dead." So Moses took his wife and his sons, put them on a donkey, and went back to the land of Egypt. And Moses carried the staff of God in his hand. And the Lord said to Moses, "When you go back to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders that I have put in your power. But I will harden his heart, so that he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, 'Thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son. I said to you, Let my son go, that he may serve me. But you refused to let him go. Now I will kill your firstborn son.' On the way, at a place where they spent the night, the Lord met him and tried to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin, touched his feet with it, and said, 'Truly you are a bridegroom of blood to me.' So he let him alone. It was then that she said, 'A bridegroom of blood,' because of the circumcision." Verse 27. The Lord said to Aaron, "Go into the wilderness to meet Moses." So he went, and he met him at the mountain of God, and kissed him. Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord with which he had sent him, and all the signs with which he had charged him. Then Moses and Aaron went and assembled all the elders of the Israelites. Aaron spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and performed the signs in the sight of the people. The people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had given heed to the Israelites, and that he had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshipped. Alright, some really good stuff there. Let's go through some biblical unlocks. Verses 1 to 9. So it's quite interesting. God speaks to Moses, and Moses is basically saying, "Look, I don't think I'm worthy. And not only do I not think I'm worthy, I don't really want to do this. And also, maybe they won't even believe that you are God, you know? So how am I meant to show that God is the one who sent me?" And God gives 3 confirmatory signs to help the people believe in Moses. The first one was the staff, right? So he throws the staff on the ground and it turns into a serpent. And when he grabs it by the tail, it turns back into a staff. So that was the first sign. The second sign was the hand, which turns leprous, right? But then it comes back. And then the last one was the water becoming blood, right? It's quite interesting there. The water of the Nile, he throws it on the ground, it becomes blood. All 3 of these, well, maybe not all 3 of these, but a lot of these are going to become really important cross-references later on. So remember, we're going to see in Exodus chapter 7, verses 14 to 25, that the water is actually going to turn to blood during one of the plagues that God is going to send down, and we're going to see that later on. Leviticus 13 explains how leprosy is a sign, and how being leprous, there are certain ritualistic purification rituals that you have to perform in order to cleanse yourself and to remove yourself, which is an important sign. And then we also saw the staff to the serpent sort of motif. And we see this in Exodus chapter 7, verse 8 to 12. So I'm going to put this in, and I'm going to show you what this means. So the staff to the serpent. So we're going to see this later, obviously, because the Bible has many cross-references, as you shall see and you shall know. So in in Exodus chapter 7, verse 8 to 12, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, perform a wonder, then you shall say to Aaron, take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh, and it will become a snake. So the same thing we see here. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did as the Lord commanded. Aaron threw down his staff before Pharaoh and his official, and it became a snake. Then Pharaoh summoned the wise men and sorcerers, and they also, the magicians of Egypt, did the same by their secret arts. Each one threw down his staff, and they became snakes. But Aaron's staff swallowed up theirs. Obviously, I'm going to explain this a lot more detail when we get to Exodus chapter 7, but we can see the staff to serpent motif again. Okay. Moses objects again, remember? He says, who am I? And he makes an excuse. I can't speak properly. I haven't been really, he protests by saying that he's incapable of speaking adequately. And God answers him. And he says, I will be with you. I will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to say. Right? It's cross-referencing again back to the who am I. I am who I am, right? This saying, very robust and timeless saying. That is to say, I am always existing, right? And then here, God is promising that I will be with your mouth and teach you what you are to say. But again, Moses is quite a stubborn fellow. And he says, oh my Lord, please send someone else. That's what he says in verse 13, right? And then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, what of your brother Aaron the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Even now he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees your heart, he will be glad. So God actually compromises a little bit, if you will. He says, okay, Aaron will be with you. So God is patient, but God knows what's best, obviously, right? God knows exactly what's best for Aaron. And that is, I will be with you. I will speak with your mouth, I will teach you what you are to say. So Moses heads back to his father-in-law in verses 18 to 23. So he heads back to his father-in-law Jethro, and God actually warns him about something. So if we go back to verses 18 to 23, he warns him that Pharaoh is going to be obstinate. And God says once again, and he continually says this, he reasserts the plan that Israel will be brought out with a strong hand, right? So verses 18 to 23. The Lord said to Moses, go back to Egypt, for all those who were seeking your life are dead, right? So the ones who were seeking his death are now dead, and hence Moses can go back to Egypt and carry out the plan that God has enacted for his people because of their cries and how God sees the affliction of those who he loves. So verses 24 to 26, what happens there? God actually tries to kill Moses. Did you see that? I don't know if you caught this, but in verse 24 it says, on the way, at a place where they spent the night, the Lord met him and tried to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin, touched his feet with it, and said, truly you are a bridegroom of blood to me. So he let him alone. It was then that she said, a bridegroom of blood, because of the circumcision. Okay, let's just take a step back. Why would God try to kill Moses in Exodus chapter 4, verses 24 to 26? Now, it wasn't an arbitrary killing, right? He's not just trying to kill him willy-nilly, but rather Moses actually disobeyed the covenant that he had with God. And this actually shows something about the sign of the covenant, for one, and how seriously God treats leadership in this particular instance. Okay, so what happens in Exodus 4, 24 to 26? Moses, right after Moses obeys God, for starters, and he heads back to Egypt, we actually read that the Lord met him and sought to kill him. We just read that. But why? Why would he do such a thing? Number one, circumcision, right, was the reason. Moses failed to circumcise his son. Now, I should probably mention that this is one of the strangest and most debated moments in the entire Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And it's important because in this particular instance, you will see that circumcision was really important, right? And we saw this in Genesis chapter 17, verse 14. Obviously, this is under the Old Covenant, but it says, "Any uncircumcised male shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant." So the person who refuses this particular covenant sign is in danger of death. Moses obviously knew this, but at least one of his sons, and we assume it's Gershom, had not been circumcised. And the reason was, or the Jewish tradition that holds that apparently Moses delayed the circumcision of his son because Zipporah was opposed, or perhaps because of travel difficulties. There are many commentaries on this particular passage, but the text doesn't explicitly state why. And the reason why this was so important was because Moses was about to represent God in front of Pharaoh, whilst simultaneously disobeying God's covenant. Right? So God was going to send Moses to confront the most powerful ruler in the world as his prophet, but then Moses was himself living in covenant disobedience. And this obviously makes Moses a hypocrite and an unfit representative. And you can't exactly lead God's people into covenant faithfulness when you yourself aren't even following the covenant. So what does Zipporah do? Zipporah steps in and circumcises the boy himself and touches Moses with the foreskin, and he says, "Surely you are the bridegroom of blood to me." And immediately the danger lifts and the covenant sign is restored, and now Moses is in covenant order for the mission. Now this seems pretty harsh, right? Like, what the hell? You didn't circumcise your son, and now you're going to die? Like, what? The stakes are extremely high because Moses is about to lead God's people, right? He is the covenant mediator, and Exodus itself is actually the covenant act. So it's really important that he is in line with his covenant purpose in this particular instance. And this actually teaches us something important. We can't live two lives. God's leaders must actually embody the covenant that they proclaim. But there is also typology here, which points towards Jesus Christ, because where Moses failed, Jesus succeeded. Moses almost died because of covenant unfaithfulness, but Jesus died for our unfaithfulness, and he saves us by the shedding of his blood. So that's it for this episode of Biblical Unlocks. This show is designed to help you keep up your habit of reading the Bible, understanding the Bible, and applying it in your daily life. I upload daily, so if you don't want to miss tomorrow's episode, feel free to rate the show and follow. Otherwise, just have a blessed day. And always remember, if you're not in your word, you're in your feelings. Godspeed.